You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
Premier League football season underway as they seek an unprecedented fourth consecutive league title. Manchester City have flexed their muscles early, cruising to a 3-0 win over Burnley. Erling Haaland, who scored 36 goals last season in the Premier League and 52 in all competitions, is off the mark already. He got 2 of the goals in this one. Let's bring in Tom Rennie from TalkSport in the UK. Tom, should we just give the trophy to Manchester City now? And how many goals will Erling Haaland score this season?
Yeah, it's tempting, isn't it? I think there's a high likelihood we're going to be handing it to them once again. If they do win the title, by the way, they'd be the first team in the history of not just the Premier League, but the history of English football, which goes back over 150 years, to win the top division title 4 times in a row. So when I tell people there's been dominance before, but not like this, and they're like, oh no. There's always been a really good team, and there's always been a runner-up, and things change. This is different. This is very different to anything we've ever seen before because of the sovereign wealth fund that backed Manchester City, the manager they have in charge, and now, as you mentioned there, the striker they have up front in Erling Haaland, who, it's funny, on Friday, I was doing the game against Burnley. He didn't touch the ball until that point. I know it had been 4 minutes, but usually City are on the attack. You expect him to touch the ball. He hadn't passed it. He'd not competed for a header. He'd not put a tackle in. The first touch of Haaland's season was to score, which is just unbelievably ominous. He is an incredible phenomenon. It's just a shame for the rest of us that he plays for Manchester City and not a potential challenger. They're favourites. They're massive favourites. The squad depth is ridiculous. They're still inexplicably trying to add players to the embarrassment of riches they've got. And Lord help us all if they do.
Could there be, less motivation? They won the treble last year. The Champions League was the thing missing for Pep at City. Any danger or any glimmer of hope for the others that they might have less motivation this time around?
Not really, because of Pep Guardiola. I mean, you mentioned his name there. The reason people want to play for him is because he demands this ludicrous level of high performance. And after a period of years, even the very best players have enough of doing it. It is just too intense and too much work to play for Pep Guardiola. It's why people like Raheem Sterling, for example, have kind of gone, look, I just can't do it anymore. And it's not that you go to another club and it's a kind of lesser level, I suppose. It's a different level. He is so unbelievably and unbearably intense, as you saw at half-time, 2-0 up against Burnley on Friday. And he's having a go at Erling Haaland for some reason or other. So I think Guardiola wouldn't allow it. I think if that even started to creep in, he would move that player on. And so, unfortunately, again, for the rest of us, I've got to say no.
All right, well, let's look at who might challenge them closest. Arsenal led for a large portion of last season before being run down. They've opened with a 2-1 home win over Forest. How do you assess Arsenal's ability to again challenge City this season?
Well, I think they'll challenge. I think they'll have an 80-point plus season. And in the history of the Premier League pre-Man City, around 85 points would have won you the title. The trouble is, in the Man City era, you've got to get 96, 97, 98 points to be champions. And that's almost perfection across the season with, at best, 3 defeats, at absolute best. I think that Declan Rice improves them. I think only Rodri is of his quality in that role in central midfield. Again, the trouble is Rodri plays for Man City. But I think that's a really good player to have in the team for big money from West Ham. I think that Jurrien Timber looks all right. And Kai Havertz, I'd take him, but I'm not sure that's a signing that wins you the Premier League title. I still think there are a couple of players short Arsenal. A couple of certainly squad depth members. I mean, Man City haven't got to bring on Jack Grealish, whereas, City or Arsenal need to use all their players in order to win a game like they did against Nottingham Forest on Saturday. So, look, Arsenal have improved a bit. Have they improved enough to beat Man City? Right now, I wouldn't pick anyone, but I do think they're going to have an 85-ish season, and that'll be top 4. And you never know. If they beat City twice, and one of these teams, if they're going to be champions, has got to beat City at least once, there's a chance.
When you run your eye down the list of results on opening weekend, you land on Newcastle, a 5-1 thumping of Aston Villa. I watched a little bit of this game, and I thought Villa were okay, but they still got beat 5-1. What about Newcastle this season?
Yeah, I was working on this game on Saturday, and look, I think Newcastle, they've learned from the mistakes of all these other sovereign wealth funds and billionaires and whatever that have come into football, who come in like, right, I'm the richest man in the room, let's get Neymar. I'm the richest person here, let's get Lionel Messi, and they've gone, well, shall we speak to the people who know football and see who they want to get and build a team? And if you look at the incremental improvements since the Public Investment Fund came in and bought a club I'm now calling the Kingdom of Newcastle United, and they bought Tonali, who scored on debut on Saturday. They bought Alexander Isak. I think that was last summer's kind of big transfer. They've brought in Sven Botman and Kieran Trippier and Nick Pope, and they're just incremental. If they had 5 out of 10 players, they bought 8 out of 10 players. If they've got an 8 out of 10 player, they bought a 9 out of 10 player. They spend consistently, but not eye-wateringly, is the best way I can think of putting it now. So consistent squad building, the right purchase at the right time. They've got Dan Ashworth, famous for picking players, working in their backroom team, identifying these talents. And look, you're right to say Aston Villa played well, and I think they will have a good season. And I think the Premier League team should win the Conference League every year. West Ham did it last year, and I expect Villa to do it this year. So they can have a good year. But Newcastle just had that ability to snatch the game away from them. They were ruthless. They were energetic. St James's Park, going to be awful to go to for teams this season. I don't know if they're going to challenge for the title. I think when the Champions League games come on them and it's a game every 3 days for them for a couple of months and all that, the fact that everyone is taking Newcastle incredibly seriously, I do think they will drop points this season and maybe lose 7 or 8 games as opposed to last season's 5. But certainly at times, second half against Villa, they were frightening on Saturday.
Manchester United, they were good at times last season, got up to third. Could they return to past glories? They're not going to win the league, are they? But what do you predict for Manchester United?
Yeah, I mean, they don't play till Monday against Wolverhampton Wanderers, so I've not had the chance to really see them as yet. I did see them in New Jersey in a game they played and beat Arsenal in a pre-season friendly. Look, I think that what's interesting about Manchester United is that this time last year, they'd just come off the back of that thumping by Brentford, and it was all about, is Erik ten Hag even going to last a week, never mind the season? And of course, we're in a different world now. They did win the Carabao Cup last year, and there is a belief in the manager, and that's so hard to get at any club, let alone Manchester United. They've not really had it since Alex Ferguson. Even the slight moments under Louis van Gaal and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, there's never been total belief. I think there's total belief in Erik ten Hag, which shows in the purchase of Rasmus Højlund, the striker, whose record's not amazing, but the manager was like, that's the guy we need. That's the striker we need. And so they backed him with £70-odd million to bring him in from Atalanta. So I think that if you've got Rashford and Højlund becomes the player the manager thinks, and Jadon Sancho and Mason Mount and Casemiro and Lisandro Martinez and Varane and Onana, that is a team that is able to win the Premier League. That is a team that is able to get 90-plus points. But again, they need to beat Man City, probably twice to do so, and they need to be consistent across the season to do so. When they have a howler of a game, like they did back end of last season against West Ham, for example, that's the kind of day that's going to cost them. Can Erik ten Hag get this team to do top performances consistently across a 10-month period? It's going to be a fascinating watch, but I think this is probably the best chance Man United have had of a great season in the best part of 15 years.
Tottenham, Harry Kane has gone. They were 8th last season. New coach, the Australian Ange Postecoglou. What do you predict for Spurs?
Well, look, I think Postecoglou has been dealt one of the biggest hospital passes in recent football history. I think that for all of his brave face in his pre-weekend press conference, he would have planned to keep Harry Kane. And if he was planning for Kane to go, then why did he play almost every single game in pre-season? Like, what are you learning in this pre-season? You're learning absolutely nothing. Why were they not bringing somebody in the knowledge that they were going to negotiate Kane's departure? Still a couple of weeks to go in the transfer window, so they will probably bring somebody in. But look, I think Postecoglou is a manager who likes his teams to play football, so I think Spurs fans will probably buy into it. But they might need to accept their place now, having lost maybe their greatest ever player and one of the few world-class strikers around. In the chasing pack, I don't give them any chance at all of finishing in the top 4. 0. I would give them a puncher's chance of finishing in the top 6, but I think they're in the conversation with Brighton and with, West Ham, if they get their signings right, Aston Villa, of teams who, if they have a really good season, might qualify for the Conference League and finish 7th. Beyond that, I think it's a massive rebuilding job. You don't just recover from Harry Kane, let alone with 2 days to go before the season starts. So, yeah, I think we might start calling it the top 7, which we've kind of been weirdly calling it recently. We go back to top 6 and Newcastle are in and Tottenham are out.
All right, and we're at Chelsea because you forget how poor they were last season, winning just 11 of their 38 games to end up 12th. Surely they can't be that bad again.
Well, no, I don't think they'll be that bad. But it's funny, I was chatting to a friend of mine who's doing the commentary of the Chelsea game on Sunday for TalkSport, and he was telling me that he thought this was the short straw of the weekend, the Chelsea-Liverpool game. And I was like, what? Chelsea-Liverpool? Amazing. Like, you must be thrilled to be doing it. And he was like, to prepare for Chelsea, it's going to take him like 2 days because he ain't got a clue. I don't know who's going to play. I don't know who's a first teamer and who's someone they brought in to sell later down the line. I don't really know the style, the formation. I don't really know if they've bought into Pochettino or not. I don't know anything. I am so incredibly ignorant right now of anything to do with Chelsea because how could anyone possibly know? The attack was meant to be built around Nkunku, but he is injured. They brought in Robert Sanchez, who was Brighton's sort of number 2 goalkeeper, to be number 1 because Kepa is kind of being sold. This summer they have sold Mendy, they've sold Mount, they've sold Pulisic, they've sold Koulibaly. I mean, the list goes on. Conte. So many have gone. So many have come in. I have not got a clue. They could get 100 points and win the league. They could finish on 50 points and finish 10th. They could get 35 points and stay up on the final day. I have not got a clue. And I hope that answer shows you how confused I am about the whole thing.
That's a brilliant answer. What about Liverpool? Are they in the same boat in many respects? Could they get 100 points or 50 points or somewhere in between?
The thing is with the Jurgen Klopp teams in recent history and his Liverpool history is that they're streaky. They're streaky. When they hit a vein of form, Klopp has this amazing ability to get everyone pulling in the right direction. He is a manager that needs momentum. If they lose a couple of games, it's going to take a while to get it back. I think that going forward, they could be really interesting with Luis Diaz and Cody Gakpo and Darwin Nunez and Jota, Salah. I mean, the attacking options are wild for Liverpool, but the midfield needs some work. It's why they went so big for Caicedo, who they ain't going to get. It's why they have been negotiating for Romeo Lavia for so long. It looks like they ain't going to get. McAllister, I think, is a good player, but they've lost Henderson and Milner and Fabinho. Huge holes there, not been plugged. And defensively, too, Virgil van Dijk, not the player he once was. Konate, consistently injured last year. Yeah, look, I think Liverpool are still, got great players, but I think they're going to be fun to watch this season if inconsistent. And inconsistent, again, in the Manchester City era, it doesn't get you a league title, I'm afraid.
All right, and just to finish, the newly promoted sides all lost on opening weekend. Burnley, Luton, great to see them back. Sheffield United. Who feels best equipped to stay up?
Well, I think this is the worst group of promoted teams that have come up in many, many years. I think that none of them have a hope of staying up. I think that Luton are, as you saw on Saturday against Brighton, they have no business being in the Premier League at all. I think there's not a single Premier League quality player in the squad. And if they get 20 points this season and win 4 games, they will have done well. I think with Sheffield United, there's some sort of issues going on there in terms of finance. You don't sell one of your best players in Sander Berge to Burnley on the eve of the season unless you've got issues. And they also had a guy called Ndiaye last season who's gone to Marseille. They've not replaced him. Don't see a Premier League quality squad there either. So I think they'll be lucky to get 25 points. And Burnley, for all the fanfare of Vincent Kompany, in the end, it's quality that matters in the Premier League. And they've bought a mismatched bunch of nobodies. There were 6 debuts against Man City on Friday. So it's a new group that haven't gelled. It might take a few weeks to gel. And if Kompany can get a bit of magic from one of these unknown quantities, amazing. But you're not going to get it from 6 or 7 of them. So I think all 3 of them will be lucky to get 30 points. And that's great news for the likes of Everton and Wolverhampton Wanderers and Bournemouth, who themselves could easily, in another year, find themselves relegated, but will probably stay up on the weakness of the trio that have joined the Premier League this year.
Outstanding summary, as always, from you, Tom. Thanks so much for joining us across New Zealand. We can't wait to see how the next 37 weeks plays out.
A pleasure. Anytime.
Good on you, mate. Tom Rennie out of TalkSport. Great to get the chance to chat to him.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.